example, if we want to address the issues of public safety, right, and say there's some special program that could make a difference in public safety, and what we're looking at here are capital expenditures. So are there different capital expenditures that would make programs and services possible within your community? So the capital expenditure on a public safety thing may be cameras. It may be special software and applications or different things like that. It may be special equipment in the police cars or for the police officers that can make that program possible, right? So some of those things we've looked at, and we've got some great information from residents all across the city. Tom Shepard is going to walk through the budget with you, the current budget proposal. And again, it's just the current budget proposal. And here's the other rule of engagement. I know a lot of times when you guys come to meetings like this, you come to meetings and elected officials tell you what they're going to do. They say, okay, here's what the bill includes, and here it is, and kind of live with it, right? This is a little bit different interaction. So when you're engaging in this process, if you ask, what are you guys going to do, or why can't you guys do this, I'm going to ask you the same question. What are you going to do, and why can't you bring that to the table and bring that into the discussions, right? So it's a little bit different. It's equivalent to somebody serving you dinner, and you go there and dinner's done, and you're going to eat what's been prepared. In this case, you're coming in the kitchen with us. We have some ingredients. We're all going to work together and see what we can come up with, right? Within the guidelines of the law and within the guidelines of what we can deliver. And we've had some great discussions in other meetings. I'm looking forward to this one. And next up is Tom Shepard to talk to you about what's in this bond initiative. The reason we have to hold this mic is so that the camera can pick up the sound, not for you.
Good afternoon. Again, I'm Tom Shepard. I'm the Chief Staff President Reed at City Hall, and I also hold a seat on the Capital Committee at City Hall. And the Capital Committee is the group of department heads, a couple aldermen, a few employees of the Comptroller's Office that help develop the list of capital needs that are before us now. First, I want to say, what is a general obligation bond? A general obligation bond is a bond that are issued with the full faith and credit of the city behind it. And what that means is when these bonds are issued, when ballot language is passed to allow the issuance of these bonds, it gives the city the ability to tax at a rate sufficient to pay the interest and the debt on the bonds. What are general obligation bonds used for? Proceeds are usually used for capital improvements, long-term capital needs that the city cannot afford with its general operating budget. So you have bridges, fire trucks, which can cost over $1 million a piece, upgrades to buildings, police equipment, and city vehicles. President Reed already discussed, and going through our packet, why we're here today is to get input from the citizens on this proposed bond. The list that the Capital Committee came up with for city capital needs totaled over $300 million. It was $325 million. The list of the recommendation from the Capital Committee to the Board of Aldermen was to fund $155 million of these capital needs. Within our power and ability, before we finally pass this thing, we can increase that amount depending on what other needs the community sees. We can go as high, we wouldn't go any higher than $200 million, but right now the recommendation was $155, but it's open for other things. The approval process that this would go through, I'm getting a feedback. The approval process this goes through is first, a board bill is introduced at the Board of Aldermen. And in that board bill, you'll have ballot language. It'll say, we're going to put before the voters, bond of such and such amount to be used for police vehicles or whatever capital needs we're going to So that has to go before the Board of Aldermen, it'll go through the Ways and Means Committee, and for this particular board bill, there will be evening meetings held so that the public can come and participate. After it goes through the Ways and Means Committee, it would have to get approved by the full Board of Aldermen. The ballot language has to get approved by the election board, and then it would become, it would get on the ballot before the voters. We're thinking in November. If we turn the page, we go into what needs were identified by the Capital Committee and what makes up that $155 million recommendation that they brought before us. For the fire department, $26 million for vehicles and equipment. That's fire trucks, EMS vehicles, breathing apparatus for the firefighters. Some of this stuff is very expensive, like I said before. The fire truck, the big fire trucks cost $1.2 million. The pumpers cost $800,000. And the last time we had a wholesale replacement of these fire trucks has been about 13 years, and we've just been kind of patching them as we go along up to now. $12 million for department buildings for the fire department. That's mostly for roofs on the buildings to prevent further damage. You know, once your roof goes bad, it creates all kind of damage in the building. So most of this money is for the roofs, some HVAC and electrical needs. Turn again for the police department. $11 million for building and equipment upgrades. One of the things in there was a building that the department head, the chief of police, would like to see is building a real-time intelligence center. What that would be used for is there's different cameras all throughout the city. The city owns some cameras, the different businesses own cameras all throughout the city. And what this real-time intelligence center would do is give the police department access to the cameras of other businesses if they agree to help them solve crimes, any footage they could get to help solve crimes. Another big chunk of it, I think it was $2.3 million, is currently the police department is moving its headquarters from Clark over on Olive Street. But what they don't have room for on Olive Street is the property custody unit. This is where they keep all the evidence for different crimes. Where they have it now, it's sometimes there's leaks in the building, property can get damaged. So what they're also looking for is another place to house this evidence, so that when they go to court, they have the proper evidence to move forward. Another big item is $15 million for demolition. Currently, there are 2,600 buildings listed, according to the building division, who was also part of this capital committee, the head of the building division. There are 2,600 buildings in the city of St. Louis that are considered structurally condemned. The cost to demolish a building is about $8,000 to $7,900. So this $15 million would cover approximately 1,900 of those 2,600 buildings. Next is corrections and public safety, $31 million for building and equipment upgrades. One of the buildings that's being looked at is MSI, that's the Hall Street jail. It was built in 1962, I believe. There's numerous mechanical and physical upgrades and different kind of maintenance that needs to be done on that building. It was originally built for people that may be waiting on a court date for 3 or 4 days. So there's numerous security upgrades they've made over the years, but currently they still have a lot of security upgrades and fixes that need to be made. Next is transportation upgrades. This is $18 million for building roads and bridges, arterial street resurfacing, and different bridges throughout the city. Now, the important thing to understand about this money is that generally how bridges will get fixed is through matching funds. So if we need a bridge to be repaired, we apply for a grant from the federal government, They would pay 80% of the cost, and we would pay 20% of the cost. So for this $18 million, if we got the federal grants necessary, we could spend close to $100 million repairing bridges. And what the Board of Public Service, our Public Works Department does, they send out structural engineers, and they go and check on all the bridges, and they give a rating to the different bridges in the city. Now, none of them are in danger of falling down right now, but what they do is they rate them, they see how much work they need done, and this $18 million, or the portion thereof that didn't cover arterial streets, would be used to repair those bridges that had the worst rating from the structural engineers. Next category is city-owned assets, $38 million for buildings and vehicles. That includes the courthouse, 1520 Market, which you know, City Hall West they call it. City Hall itself, vehicles, trash trucks, snow plows, tow trucks, etc. So all the different buildings that the city owns, all the vehicles, that's included in this category of $38 million. Now, how are the bonds repaid? Bonds are repaid through tax revenues generated from property tax. That's real estate tax and property tax on your car. Technically what happens is there's an increase per $100 assessed value of your property. The current proposal would include a 15-cent increase for every $100 of assessed value of your property. Now we have a slide in this packet that puts that amount in more, layman's terms on what the value is of your property, what you would consider the market value of your property, and how much money additionally you would spend every year on taxes. That's the next slide if you turn over the page. And now this is one scenario on how this can happen. And this scenario is a $175 million bond issuance. If that's the amount that we went for, this scenario could apply. And in this scenario, we would issue $45 million. So once if the bond issue passes at the ballot, we don't have to issue the total amount of the bonds at once. We can issue them out in phases. So in this scenario, we would be issuing the bonds in 3 different phases. And the first phase could happen as soon as this year. We could issue $45 million in bonds and start spending some of that money with no tax increase. And then we can make another issuance in 2015 of $65 million, and that issuance would increase the levy on your assessed value of your property 15 cents per $100 of assessed value. In 2016, we could again issue another $65 million bond issuance with no increase in property taxes required. Now let's put this in terms of what people generally consider is just when they think about their home or their cars, how much it's worth, what its value is. So we've got 3 different situations or scenarios here. In homeowner number 1, if you have a home and the appraised value, market value is $75,000, and you have a car and the appraised value if the appraised value is $5,000, currently you're paying in property taxes combined, real estate and personal property, about $1,208. Under this scenario, these 3 issuances, $45 million, one of $65 million, and another of $65 million in 2014, 15, and 16. Under that scenario, homeowner number 1 would now be paying an additional $24 a year in combined property taxes. Now let's move to homeowner number 2. If you have a home and your appraised value is $125,000, a car with a market or appraised value of $15,000, you're paying now roughly $2,181 in property tax combined. Again, under this scenario, what this would do is increase your annual tax rate or tax amount by $43. let's take homeowner number 3. If you own a home and your appraised value, market value is $250,000, and you have a car that's worth about $25,000, you're currently paying in combined property taxes about $4,236 a year. Under this scenario of bond issuance, your combined property taxes will increase by $84. So that's how, you know, it's 15-cent increase on $100 of your assessed value, but in more, you know, market layman terms, that's how much the tax increase, that's what you would feel, that's what would come out of pocket every year additionally, keeping everything else the same. If, you know, every other assessment on your tax bill stays the same, that's how much this bond issuance will increase it. Now I'll open the floor for any questions. Yes, sir.
So I attended the last one of these as well, and I'm still vague on this point. You said that the board bill would contain the ballot language, which is necessarily
Yes.
pretty brief, so somebody can read it when they're in the booth. So
Yes.
it might say something like money for the police department.
Yeah.
But there might be some things for the police department that I think are a good idea and some things I think are a terrible idea. Is there something that locks the spending of this money in, that goes into more detail so that it's not somebody else after the thing passes who's making those real concrete decisions?
There is a detailed list of, you know, how they came up to these amounts, both the 155 and the 325. There's a detailed list, how many cooking ladders they're going to buy for the fire department, how many pumpers, and that list will be made available.
Is that just suggestions, basically? Is anybody tied into that list when it goes to spending the money?
Just attach it to the bill.
Yes, we can attach it to the bill it'll be attached as an appendix to the bill. This is what the money will be. Now, there'll be some things, like what I talked about with the bridges, and that money could be used for a match for a federal grant. Now, if we don't get any grants within the time period we have to spend this bond money, then that money would be used for something else that fits into the ballot line, because otherwise we wouldn't be able to spend it. So there is some, you know, leeway in that regard. But for most of this stuff, as soon as the bonds are issued, the money will start getting spent right away. And later on this afternoon, we'll talk about another board bill that's coming through with a committee, an oversight committee made of citizens that can see that spending as it's happening or before it's happening, to report on it and, you know, make the voice of the people heard of whether or not it should be spent that way or not.
Yeah. And it's equivalent to when we did the public safety bond initiative, Proposition S fund, and in that language we carved out a portion of that for programs and services for kids, right? So what we do is we provide grants every year from that fund. And if you think about that bond initiative, that was one of those things, just like what we're talking about right now. It was not in the original plan at all, right? It was an idea that someone had that said, how can we begin to help some of these nonprofits address the issue of public safety in our city, right? And what the nonprofits said, we need funding for various different programs. We know the program, and we have some funding coming in for the feds. We need some local match funds and things of that nature. So we put that $1 million in, and we adjusted the language, the ballot language, and it came in as an attachment to the bill. So it'll be the same type of thing here. When we look at some of these broader ideas that at the end of the day can affect the neighborhoods and communities, we'll work with the language in the bill and everything to make sure that this stuff is indeed locked in. Otherwise, it'll just.
So correct me if I'm wrong, but I think it was with Proposition S where the police department was given money to give raises to the officers, and instead they decided to increase the number of officers. It might have been a good decision. No, the other way around.
It was exactly the other way around on that piece, and then on the funding piece, the youth crime prevention piece, right? And that's the $1 million that we carved out for that. That's replenished annually, right? But you're right on that, which is why we have to make sure. which is why it's important that we have the language as defined as possible in these bills when we move through. And that's why we're taking the time to make sure we do that on this bill.
I was just gonna say, I think a concern that I've heard come up at a couple other meetings is that with hearing from the departments what's proposed, and just say, for example, the fire department, and let's say they want $12 million, and the city is like, we really wanna fund the fire department, but we absolutely do not want fire trucks. We do not want new fire trucks. And at the risk of losing this entire bill, is there a way to say, like, we know that the city wants to support this department or this aspect, but they're willing to vote no if we get new fire trucks, that we could say, like, we'll approve everything else, but we'll take out the fire trucks, or we'll look at a different issue. I don't know, I'm picking fire trucks because it's benign. There's been other issues that have come up that people are really concerned about particular pieces of. But just as a case example, like, if there's something that the citizens are like, we're all on board except for this one thing that would be paid for with this, is there a way to take that one thing out and do it separately, or to make sure that it's not spent on that and that money gets allocated elsewhere? That's just something that I've heard come up.
Yes, yes. There is a way to word the language where it would not include something that would make people decide they're going to vote completely. I mean, we wouldn't say not for this, but you just wouldn't include it.
Yeah, and you have to think about it in a much broader context. So we have a sampling of the residents here, right? But by no means is this a viewpoint of every person in the city of St. Louis. But each one of those areas have an elected representative at the Board of Aldermen that they need to engage with also, to say, look, this is what I'm looking for, this is what I need, this is what we talked about, this piece of the bill. And this piece of the bill is in that final language, and I need to make sure, I really want you to vote, yes or no based on that, right? So that part of the process still happens. And that's, you cannot just omit that piece when we're looking at this whole thing. It's really gonna take, further engagement past just these meetings to make sure that at the end of the day, it reflects what you personally would like to see. And in our system of government across America, at the end of the day, you will not get 100% of what you want. I want. Nobody here will. But what we're looking for and what we want to see is that, that yes, we have influenced this thing and we've changed it in a way where it can impact my community in a positive manner. And I can see some real good coming out of it, right? And that generally makes for a stronger bill and stronger spending, because we end up with something that represents the entire community.
Yeah, and that's why we asked the Ways and Means Chair at the Board of Aldermen to hold these committee hearings in the evening so that people can come out for those.
Yeah.
How was this recommended figure arrived at?
Months of meeting and deliberation of the different, the originators of it are the different department heads, because they know the most about what their department needs,
So really,
and they know the most about
you're
what
telling me that they put their number on the table and then they added them all.
They put their numbers on the table. Well, remember, there's a $325 million is
Yes.
what they brought to the table. What this recommended list contains is $155 million of that. After debate and meeting and thinking of different ways to do things.
Is there
And
a
then
reason,
now we're including.
is there a reason they're not going for their stretch goal?
That way we just can't, I mean, it would just be too much. We have to keep in mind the credit rating of the city and not having too much debt. Some of the things are critical. Some of the things, we kind of need, and some of the things are just, desirous would be good. So we have to make decisions based off that.
You have this list of our bond history. Is there a matching list of what's been paid?
Michael's gonna cover the list of the bond history, or are you gonna?
He's going to cover the bond history from previous bonds. We do have a list of what was paid from the previous bond. I don't know if it's included. We had it for the PowerPoint presentation. I don't know if it's included in this packet. The last bond we did like this, where it went to the ballot and there was a tax increase included, a GO bond, was $19.99. And the budget director, who was at the other two meetings but couldn't make this one because he had some family obligations out of town, he has a list of what was what that previous bond, everything it was spent for.
Yeah, and part of what, and you guys know that we introduced that, government transparency bill, right? And we got it passed. So part of what we're working on also is to make sure that information is readily available. So, back in '99 when they passed that last one, there really wasn't a lot of community input, no community input like what we're doing now, right? And then certainly on the back end, there was no tracking as to what was being spent out of those bond proceeds. We're setting up a system where when those bond proceeds are spent, we're gonna be reporting it out, and you're gonna be able to go to the website and see, okay, yes, we voted out and approved 175 million. These things have been funded, and here are the other things that are coming up. So that's part of what we're doing to make sure that there's engagement, and the public has an opportunity to continue to stay engaged and what their tax dollars being spent for.
Yes.
What happens if this fails?
I mean, if it fails and we don't get any of this, then we'll be trying to find, revenue out of the operating budget, which we don't have to do this. I mean, a lot of this stuff won't happen. I mean, it's very critical that it passes. Let's just put it like that, to the operations of the city.
Yeah, here's the thing, and Alderman Villa back there, he'll be part of, these discussions and have an opportunity to really hold these departments, to what they're saying they absolutely have, and they have to have. Myself and some of the other legislators, when they come through the Board of Aldermen, we have an opportunity to really begin to question them. So when this bill begins to move, we're going to have those departments in front of us, and they're going to have to provide us with all the documentation and everything. Another thing that I'm going to ask from some of the departments is to have some tours. So like the fire department or whatever, see if we can get the fire department to host a couple of tours with some community people, so we can kind of see what's going on and how this equipment and how these capital expenditures will make a difference, and why are they really needed, so.
Yes, sir.
Is there a budget justification that's been created besides just a list? Say, we need to replace this ladder in the fire department because it's X amount of years old and it's supposed to be replaced every X years. Is there that justification attached to every single item that these departments are requesting? Because I'm looking at it as, I work for an agency that submits grants. We have to create a budget justification, we submit that grant. And I look at it as you're submitting a grant proposal to us, so we need to see the justification for approval of that grant. So is there something out there to hold these department heads accountable that are asking for this money?
Oh, yeah, the first step was for them to come before this capital committee and say, this is what we need, and then the question, well, why do you need that, why do you need that, can't you do this, can't you do that? I can't say that right now there is a document for each thing that's listed, because, the current one is such and such years old next to each item, but that information can be provided definitely and corrected.
You need to this is one of those things, make sure you bring that out and bring that to the full group, because that's one of those things that, at the front end of this process, because the traditional way of doing it is that, the departments come to the Board of Aldermen, we ask them questions, and then we'll ask them to provide us documentation, and they'll provide us the documentation, and it's a give and take like that. But, I can see where it is a good idea that there's a line item budget justification for especially these big bond deals.
So I'm going to take these last two questions, I think.
So given that we just completed a $4.6 million planning process through East West Gateway for our regional plan for sustainable development, why are none of those initiatives that came from the community included in this, specifically like transit, for instance?
That's why we're here today.
Okay.
So when you break out your session, make sure to bring that out and then report back out. That's exactly why it's important that we engage the community.
But why didn't that happen at the board level? Because the plan is.
It hasn't hit the Board of Aldermen yet. It
has not hit. This is on, and that's what I was trying to explain to you guys. We're on the very front end of the process, right? And the Board of Aldermen has not even begun to engage in this thing yet, but they will be, right? So what we wanted to do is to take it out to the residents and say, hey, what would you like to see? What are some of those issues? So that when we begin those discussions, those things are factored in and baked in from the very beginning, right? And then we're not trying to retrofit it on the back end, which is the normal process. So we're in the kitchen, and then all the ingredients laid out, and we're gonna see what we can come up with. Make sure we're good.
Well, first of all, thanks for opening this up, because I think this is good about having the community input, but echoing some of the comments that we've already heard, but questions, I just like have concerns about like where this list is coming from and like why isn't there like community, not only community input on the prioritizing them, but on what projects can be in and out. And so is there ability for community to say, I want more transportation and I don't want, for me and others, I don't want a police intelligence center. Like,
Oh, yes, definitely. And this, I guess it's kind of the, you know,
Right here.
expectate the paradigm shift is what you've been getting, so you're expecting not to get input this time, but this is what we're here for.
Yeah.
Is to get your input.
and so then there can be those locks to prevent such things as the police intelligence center from being spent within the bond issue.
Yeah, right here. I mean, that's where we're at. Right there, exactly what you said is what you need to bring out in the group and bring back. And those are the things that we're compiling, and we're going to be moving forward in that direction. Again, this, you know, the departments gave us their list and said, this is what we need, right? And
Or what they want.
this is what we want / need, right? So we have that list. And I know that the money's coming from all of us, right? All of us are going to pay it if this thing passes. Why is it so important that we have these meetings? Because 80% of the time when these things hit the ballot, they pass. Right? So if all you got was the ballot language that said, will you vote for this bond initiative that will address issues of public safety and a couple other buzzwords, 80% of the time people are going to go to the ballots and they're going to pass that. But what you don't know is what's going to happen behind the closed door, what is attached to that, and what's really going to get funded from that. Right? So what we're doing now is we're bringing it out to the people and saying, here's what the proposal is. Here's what a GO bond is. What are some of your ideas, and what do you believe we should do with this money? If we're gonna take on 175 to $200 million in debt, what do you think is important? What are some of those things that are important to you? So those are the things that we need to do.
I'm going to bring up Michael Powers, who's going to talk to you about previous bond issuances and the citizen input process.
Very briefly, and we'll get more questions when we finish this round. So you've all had a chance to ask some questions. I know there's probably a million more questions to be asked, but what's really important is that we have time today to ask you questions. We need to get answers from the community. We need the community's input on prioritizing funding. So as Tom has gone over, the money is over a 20-year period, and we have to prioritize what we spend on. So citizens can have a real influence over not only what we spend on, but when we spend on what, in what order. So I'm just going to go quickly over some bond history in the city and give some examples of some things that GO bonds are being used for in other states. So looking at this sheet here, you can see that, like has been covered, I think, pretty thoroughly. $155 million is what the departments are telling us are critical needs. Why is there no funding in there for transit? Because we don't have a transit department. So this is department heads coming and saying, here's what we need to continue our current obligation and to do what we're already doing. So if the city's not already doing it, there's not going to be a placeholder for them. But with what the analysis of our debt limit allows, we can see up to $40 million or maybe even more being spent on really innovative things for the city, things that you can touch and feel and see. And you know that in 2014, because of that bond issuance passing, X happened, and you trip over it. You know, a lot of the things that the bonds have been spent on in the past, we hear about them and we don't see, you know, where the money's going. When the budget director came to us at the first meeting on Wednesday and presented the 1999 list of expenditures, you'd be surprised how many elected officials were seeing that for the first time ever. So elected officials aren't even, given insight into how bond dollars are being spent in the past. We're in a real sticky situation here, folks. We have to not only make this process more transparent to all of us as voters and residents in the city of St. Louis, but to the elected officials so that they can be the check and balance for some of the expenditures as they come out. And President Reed at the end will talk a little bit about how we intend to oversee, have a resident component to oversee how expenditures go out. So when the police department comes and says, we want this intelligence center, that resident group can say, we don't think that that's a priority. And they'll make it public, they'll report it. And at that point, it's very difficult for a department to operate if there's, if there's broad resident opposition, because it puts the future of bond issuances at risk, right? So moving on here, we're looking at some programs, and we're still working with the state of Missouri to figure out what kind of leeway we have. But in Austin, Texas, they're spending about $2 million a year. They passed a $65 million bond issuance for home repair for seniors and low-income households. They're doing about 300 houses, so helping people stay in their homes. In Oklahoma City, they're spending $75 million over 25 years, giving employers that add jobs, after proving they're able to add the jobs, some incentives to keep the jobs in Oklahoma City. Phoenix, Arizona has a historic preservation program, so for folks that live in historic districts that are having a hard time meeting those standards, they do facade, they do roof, they do windows. In Tacoma, Washington, they thought the police department was too centralized, so they spent a lot of money on creating neighborhood-based substations. Looking at the bond history in St. Louis, I put this on here not as a apple-to-apple comparison, because if you look, it's a $1 billion basically bond issuance if you looked at it in today's money in 1955. But this is a huge thing. This was a city that was saying, hey, we're going to grow, we're going to do amazing things, and our residents have needs. We created hospitals, we built expressways, we widened streets, gravelway and natural bridge, things we're trying to fix now. We did the street lighting citywide. It was a huge thing, so the Cobra headlights that no one likes, those went in. We created, programs. We built the Climatron. We funded the zoo, public library, art, Heal Center, Alamo Plaza. You can think of things over time that are kind of landmarks in the city, and many of those things, including the building of the Arch, were made possible through bond issuances. But like I said, we've talked a lot, you've asked some questions of us, and we have some questions for you. So go back to your tables, give them your groups. We've got this survey. These are just some ideas that we came up with. There's also another section, so give us your big idea. Use the back of this sheet to write down, give us more details of your idea. In front of you, we've got a map of the city of St. Louis. Think of this as an asset map. So tell us what is an asset in your community. Tell us what is an opportunity for your community, or tell us what the challenges are for your community. Write on those maps. If you don't want to share something in the group, write it down on a Post-it note, stick it on the map, and we'll still give it to it. But take this opportunity to talk to one another. If you're here as a facilitator, raise your hand, please. So we've got Annie here, and we've got Danny, and Rhonda, you're my facilitator. But try to keep, so what we're looking for is we're trying to keep the conversations positive and forward-looking and solutions-oriented. So, and make sure that you allow everyone a little bit of room to talk.
Alderman Villa, do you want to say anything before we get going? And I can't thank you enough for coming today.
Yeah.
Other than good afternoon, I'm here to learn.
Now, that's a huge understatement coming from Alderman Villa, because he served and stayed. He served as president of the Board of Aldermen, the guy. So he's a wealth of knowledge, and he's been through these processes before at state level and local level. So I can't thank you enough for coming today, Alderman. Let's give him a round of applause.
Join our tables too, like the people that are at tables without facilitators.
It would probably be best, yes.
Pull up a table that has a facilitator.
Alderman Villa can help with that.
Well, and then, you know, I've got Felicia, this is the NSO in the 6th Ward. He's cutting out, she's cutting out.
And so this, we're gonna have about 20 minutes maximum, just to come up with some ideas, mark some things down. We're gonna come back, report it out, and try to get out of here as close to on time as possible.
So these are identified.
Find out what someone said.
No, he got one. He's got one.
Well, we need somebody to take it around to the table.
Oh, the talk.
Hey, Mary. Okay, thank you all for all the thought that you put into this. I know that you just received a lot of information, and so I know everyone's trying to digest that information, and then we're asking you to come up with ideas on the spot, and I know that that's not an easy process, so I'm pretty proud of what I saw. I think you guys are really kind of giving information that we hadn't thought about, and ideas that will almost definitely get included in one way or the other over the 23 years of this bond issue. What we're going to do now, Mary, who is the smartest, hardest working person in the president's office, who runs the show, she was gone for 1 week, and everything went up in flames. Nobody knew where the counters were, nothing, you know, we couldn't figure out where the bathroom key was. So, thank you, Mary, for everything. And we're going to come to each table. If the facilitator at the table wants to report back some of the general themes, that's great. Or if the table has assigned somebody else, all we want is for you to give us kind of a sense of what was talked about. And if you have any like cool ideas you want to share. And I think we're going to start here. Sorry, we'll start.
I'm with them.
You're with them. Okay, we'll start here with Rhonda then. Rhonda, if you want to start first.
And just so you know, Tom will be taking notes. He's going to scribe it, and that'll allow us to compile it later and re-present it to you. And we'll also be using the video, which is why we really need you to talk into the mic for a minute. So stand up and tell us what you guys came up with.
Okay, so our discussion was primarily in that 40 million extra pot about transit and the need for north-south transit line. And then we had a lot of questions about the $155 million pot, which was sort of the wish list of the city departments, because city departments are not reflective of the needs of the community, like for instance the transit question. So as the audience had stated before, we had concerns about not being able to pull out specific pieces of, you know, like the police surveillance system out of some of the other funding.
Thank you very much.
Doesn't mean that you can't pull it out. You should make that recommendation.
And then we'll go back here. Colleen or Charlie?
I think we decided that I was going to do it. Okay, great. Okay. Sorry. Hi, I'm Colleen. There was concern around really wanting a focus on transit and defining what transit meant. I think that folks really feel pretty strongly about wanting more public transportation and that to be really defined, including in this form, so people understand that transit, that if people are choosing it, that they're not choosing more infrastructure going to support cars, but to support public transportation. More specifically, the North Side Connector promised 10 years ago, I think. And then the other thing that we had some concern about was the Real-Time Intelligence Center, and concerns that we are putting a lot of money into something that's really vague and we don't really have a lot of information about, and again, supporting a lot of stuff that seems that is not really into preventing crime, but more into just catching more criminals in a country that has a lot of problems with mass incarceration.
Oh, you might want to say one thing about lighting. I know we talked a little bit about.
Oh yeah, so we were kind of talking about wanting to do. Putting more money with investments that make our community and our neighborhoods safer, which we see as sort of, there are lots of different things, but one of them was streetlights. especially in more people.
Hello, thanks for holding this on a holiday weekend. Thanks everybody for coming and participating. I'm a business owner, Fuller Outdoor Media, and also a foundation founder, the W.C. Handy Memorial Foundation. So what it is the 100th year anniversary of W.C. Handy's composition St. Louis Blues, and we've commissioned a statue that's going to go in front of the National Blues Museum. We hope it's a nice, positive rallying point for the city. A lot of people to get their hands around and participate in. But with our billboard company that encompasses all the neighborhoods in town, I see a lot of positive things happening. Friendly's Temple area has $500 million worth of investment out on Martin Luther King. Encourage somebody to move out there. The McKee development is moving forward. You have stuff down here in this ward. This beautiful establishment was never here, and its sister establishment, O'Fallon Park. So if we could build on what's there, you can participate with who's already in the neighborhoods, the Annie Malones, the Demetrius Johnson, the Better Family Life. All of these entities have wonderful things going on now, and you can volunteer to help them. So the solution to a problem of a lot of people not having jobs or work, if we could subsidize and make more monies available for the reentry program of difficult to hire individuals who are offenders, either multiple, misdemeanors or a couple felonies. If you could encourage the contractors, the plumbers, the painters, the different, drivers of, small business here, if you could make some monies available where they could have new entry personnel subsidized so they could get them on their feet and learn if they're a good fit for the company, you could get a lot of people off of the streets and they'll be too tired at night to do anything dirty. So thank you everybody for coming. Thank you, Louis, and thank you, Michael.
Anything else come out of your table?
About the money.
Well, I know that this gentleman over here had some ideas, but they fall in line with what's already been discussed, I think.
Well, thank you so much. So one example that he's given, this needed investment in training programs, what that could look like then would be, a job training center of some type, or expanding on job training facilities. So we're on board with that, Dan. Thanks for that insight.
Good afternoon. Thank you, Mr. President. As you all know, I usually freeze up when there's a microphone in my hand. I don't know that our group was as well focused maybe as we should have been, but we certainly enjoyed the camaraderie. I think a couple of big questions, as you and I both know, we have to be very careful as to what bond counsel recommends, whether or not we put a ceiling on this. And I think, contrary to popular belief, and whether you like it or not, when you give, for instance, the chief of police a budget, you really have to have some confidence in it to be able to spend those monies however he feels is the best way. Same way with the fire department. I mean, unfortunately, I think there's a disproportionate share of money in this for public safety, but how can I be against public safety? But if you look at the numbers, the fire department, the police department, those are big numbers. And I think, as this evolves, and I applaud what we're doing here today, I think it's really good. Nothing more important than hearing what the man and lady on the street thinks, which is exactly what we're doing. But I also think we're going to probably need to clarify, what it's going to do to the tax bills. When you say we're not going to raise it the first year, what we don't want to do is be disingenuous. And when you're raising a tax on personal property, when it's a property tax, and you have 2 cars in a house, it's going to impact, and it's going to impact your bottom line. We haven't done. I would like to see us give more attention to the things, quite frankly, that we have now that have gone in disarray just because they're old. Mr. President, as you and I both know, City Hall, which is a spectacular building, maybe unique in all the country, that has been, we have just let some of the items there fester, and that's lamentable. That's a shame. I don't see us building any new buildings for evidence for the police. I can take them to Dee and I can take them down to South Broadway and find a lot of empty buildings. And I'm being facetious, but and I've talked long enough. But again, thanks for doing this. And again, I kind of get a kick out of listening to what I don't see that many normal people. I have to deal with reading. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you. So we also had a discussion at the table that I think covered a lot of the specifics that were mentioned at some of the other places. You know, one of the areas of concern was the Central Intelligence Center. And what that brought up was some specifics about things that we thought that we could do to address public safety instead. And I felt like that was a recurrent theme.
Sorry, just back up to the camera behind you so you know.
There we go. There, here. Where am I going?
I got you right there.
Here?
She does such a great job.
Okay,
Andy's been here every meeting so far. She does such a great job.
Do you have my light now? Okay, great. So we were able to talk about some of the specifics, but I think what that brought up was this idea of a larger process of having that say going forward. That if there are certain things in the budget that we think shouldn't be spent or shouldn't be built or shouldn't be added to, that we have enough time as residents to come up with alternatives. And we were able to come up with some really great ideas about street lighting and economic development and business incubation, as was mentioned at this back table and has been echoed throughout. You know, nothing stops a bullet like a job, those sorts of things where if we create those opportunities that we will ultimately impact public safety, but we wanted more time to think about those specifics and offer concrete alternatives moving forward so that as the residents, we don't feel like we're getting stuck with someone because they had a longer period of time to come up with what they wanted their solution to be before we had an opportunity to present ours. And so ultimately what we talked about a lot was this idea of the process of how this should move forward, that there are lots of existing neighborhood councils like here in Carondelet and in other parts where they've already done assessments and they're already working together, but there isn't a lot of opportunity to cross-pollinate those ideas, to meet with the other neighborhood councils that are doing things. And so while we know that there's a proposal bill going forward, sorry, I have some insider information. We know that there's a proposal going forward to create this sort of 9-member panel of residents who will help monitor the bill. We were thinking maybe even having a larger advisory council or more of these community meetings that they would facilitate that would also help serve as an advising body to that governing body that would go along with the bill, and really having opportunities to come together and to work through some of these concrete ideas. And I wrote them all down so everybody will have an opportunity to hear them or see them at some point. But I think the final thing that I wanted to close with, which was a salient point that really came home for me too, is that given the amount of time that it takes to get all this money in and to then spend it, that we don't want to be 15, 20 years down the road asking, did we do the right thing? Because it's too important and it impacts too many people. And the more people we have involved at the front end, the more voices we have at the table, the more it creates that buy-in from the residents, so that at the end of the day, as we're seeing these things go up and play themselves out, that we feel like we've made the right decision because it was decisions that we knew about and that we made together.
Okay, finally we're going to hear from, I think these guys work together. Or, sorry.
At this time, we touched on lighting, which a couple other tables did too. Lighting is good because it definitely helps keep the neighborhood secure. But we can put a bunch of lights up, but if they're not efficient, kind of defeats the purpose as far as I'm concerned. We touched on neighborhood grocery stores. There probably need to be a few more of those because of the elderly, handicapped, so they can get, make it convenient for them. No more surveillance cameras. I don't think we need no more of those. More energy efficient projects, whatever they may be, making buildings, homes, businesses more efficient. More recycling projects. We discussed that. So whatever we can do to recycle, whatever it is that we need to recycle, I think that would be a good idea too.
Before we go to this table, I want to bring out one thing that was said at this table so that it's not lost. one of the things the young man in the last one, the presenter in the last, I don't know your name.
Todd.
Todd?
Yes.
One of the things that Todd said at the table, he said, is there a way to do an energy efficient audit, right, of the buildings and invest in technology that would lower our costs for energy and make these buildings and everything operate more efficiently? And when you think about that and you carry that forward, that's, you know what that would mean? That would mean that at the end of the day, we have more revenue available for police officers, for public, all kinds of other things on the back end if we invest in technology on the front end and lower our overall energy costs. I think that was a phenomenal idea,
Thanks.
and especially at this time.
Thanks, appreciate it.
First, I just want to talk about a few of the things that we were opposed to from the beginning, just to get those out of the way. Our group wasn't in support of a surveillance system. We thought it was we preferred more, community building type strategies, crime prevention strategies, rather than a system which we may not know what its effect is. We felt that streetscaping should not be a priority of this unless it is contributing to public safety programs like pedestrian street lighting, which we were very much in support of. We also felt that no further investment should go towards potentially obsolete facilities, such as possibly the medium security prison, unless a due return on investment study is made beforehand. And then for the positive things, that we were hoping to see. We felt, again, that public safety was one of the top priorities. We felt, most importantly, that this spending needs to be done with a long-term strategy, with a master plan, to see how this, is a lot of money. Much money will spend for the next few years, So what is the long-term implications, and how does all this spending come together in a master plan? How does it all fit together? A lot of the things, this laundry list, are probably, needed items, but how does it all fit together in a master plan? We also supported the idea of setting aside a small portion of this funding for participatory budgeting throughout the process, maybe toward at the ward level, small amount of money annually so that the wards, the citizens can decide how this money is being spent for improvements in their neighborhood.
So along those lines, if we had, some funding set aside for match funding, right? So that if a project came through your community that you would want to engage in related to participatory budgeting, if we had a match funding pool set up, that could work for us for your last item that you outlined, right? Did you guys discuss that at all?
It was kind of like the alderwoman in Gracia is doing in her ward with the Poisoned Block grants, that she let the constituents vote on what they wanted the money to be used for.
Okay.
That's kind of what we talked about.
Perfect. I know in one of the other earlier sessions, what came out was setting aside some money for match funding so that it can be used within the participatory budgeting process.
I believe that was something that came up at our table as well. For example, if there was a neighborhood such as Carondelet that had a plan that had several phases where they were able to get some of their money together, could some of this money be set aside to match the funds that that particular ward or neighborhood is raising for their project so that they're able to complete the things that they've started?
All right, excellent, excellent. I thought those were great suggestions. Our license collector just raised her hand. She wants to say hi to you real quick.
It wasn't, it's more than a hi, but hello. I too wanted to echo what Alderman Villa said, that I really am happy that we're doing the town halls and getting the participation, and thank you for allowing me to participate. One of the things that we also talked about at our table that I think is an excellent idea, we talked about the building trades that are already have training centers. And so why can't we use those resources that talent from the students that are learning the trades. And so, you know, we talked about demolition of buildings and about the public safety issue that causes, and also about street lighting, about transits. And so we have world-class institutes of education right here. And so not only the educational institutions that we have, but also the building trades. And so why can't we put them all to work? Because when we talked about the master plan, we also didn't want to spend a whole bunch of money with bringing outsiders outside of St. Louis to come in and develop a master plan for us. And so we said that we have the knowledge and the institutional fortitude right here in the city actually to do that for ourselves. And so that's what I wanted to say. Thank you, everybody.
And I hope, Mrs. Thompson, that today some of your questions were answered. She's been on this bond issue from the beginning, wondering how it's going to affect the business climate in the city. And unfortunately, I haven't had all the answers for you, but I hope this is kind of making it more clear, because I know businesses are interested in the issue. So
most definitely, thank you.
Yes.
Can you all talk a little bit about the timeline of what's going to happen?
Well,
because I think this is great, this initial thing, but I just want to make sure that this is not the first conversation around this. Yeah. And if you guys are going to take this back and then re-present it to the community, and how we can go about when it's going to be the Board of Aldermen, and when it's going to be on the.
Originally, they wanted it on the August ballot. That's like impossible to do, because the departments and the people, they would like to have seen it on the August ballot. That's like impossible to do, because that means that the minute it landed at the Board of Aldermen, we would have to introduce it and begin having committee hearings and take it right through the board, and we can't do that. So right now we're targeting the November ballot. That gives us quite a bit of time on the front end to begin to look at this thing, to talk to residents, to have public involvement in it, to have several committee hearings, so that there's lots of conversation centered around it, and then begin to move it through the Board of Aldermen. So right now our end goal is to try to get this thing ready and as many questions flushed out as possible, and as good a bill as possible on the ballot for November.
So for a bond, can I just ask some technical questions? So for a bond proposal, it's going to go to the. So is it going to go to like Ways and Means Committee, or is it going to be broken? Each of these going to be broken? Is it going to be broken up?
No, I'm going to send this thing to Ways and Means. It'll go to Ways and Means, and then when it hits the ballot, another important note: it takes 4/7 vote for this thing to pass.
And I just was going to say, in order for it to have been on or be on the August ballot, we would have to be done with it at the Board of Aldermen by mid-May, or by May 27th. They would have to be approving the ballot language, the Board of Election. So we would have to be done with it, have to be in effect before then.
So is it for sure not going on the August? Are you guys, I mean, things just change a lot in City Hall.
Well, Louis is the sponsor.
I'm the primary sponsor of the bill. You see that guy in that red jacket?
Okay, that's great.
He would kill me if we tried to put before then. So now it will
public
be on.
setting, it's not going to be on the August ballot.
It will be on that November ballot.
Just a follow-up question about participation. So I just happened across this information. Will there be a better way for the public to know that these meetings are happening? How will we know which Ways and Means Committee to go to?
So if you go to the last page, the thank you page, on the bottom you're going to see a website that we've created. It's propelstl.org. On there you'll see a similar setup as tonight, where we'll have a map of the city where you can pinpoint geocode an idea, you can share a new idea, you can comment on the proposal at hand, and continue that conversation online. But in terms of getting this information out, we have partnerships with the media. We're trying to do as best we can. We posted on Nextdoor. How many folks are on your Nextdoor neighborhood? You are?
Yes, I saw it on Nextdoor.
Great. How many saw it on Nextdoor? Good, good. So we will post information on Nextdoor out to all the neighborhoods. We will have it on, you know, all types of social media as we did this time. There was a story in the Post-Dispatch about this round of meetings, so we're hoping that the Post will do a story when we have another round of meetings. If you didn't sign in though, make sure you do. Give us your phone number. If you have an email address, that's great too, because we're going to follow up and email everyone as any kind of decisions on this are made. So those are the ways of doing it. And there's no perfect way. We'd like to go door to door and shake every hand and do a personal invitation to everybody, but you know, we don't have the budget.
And we're also going to make the video available.
And the videos will be available in public, and they'll probably also air on SPL TV 10. And be given to each alderman for distribution. If you have further questions, stick around. I'm going to be here. Oh, the last thing I guess I'll talk about. So the second thing that Lewis did this legislative session was introduce board bill number 2. First board bill is always the placeholder bill for the annual fiscal year budget. Second board bill this year is creating this oversight committee. And so the Board of Estimate and Apportionment, who are the mayor, the comptroller, and the president of the Board of Aldermen, the 3 citywide elected officials, will be able to appoint 3 members each to this oversight committee, which will be approved by the Board of Aldermen. Now this is something that we have to get the Board of Aldermen's stamp of approval on, so it's not by means completely finished. We probably want to work on the language of it a little bit. But that oversight committee is going to be the designated reporter and reviewer and assessor of everything that gets proposed as this goes forward. So we're not going to have a situation where, you know, 10 years after the bond issue, like happened in '99, or 15 years after, we find out, oh, what did we do with that? And how great was that? So there's going to be an ongoing audit, assessment, review, if this passes. I don't want to talk like it's a sure bet, but and so if you're interested in that, come to us, talk to the comptroller's office, talk to the mayor's office, get ahead of it, you know, let them know that you're interested in being on that. But I'll stick around, and President Reed and Tom will stick around if you have any questions for us and for everybody else. Thank you so much for coming during Holy Week. We didn't know how fast track this would be, and if it had to go through the board in a fast, you know, frame, we'd have to have it ready to go next Friday, so that's why we have this inconvenient week of meetings. But we're going to do more town halls going forward, so stay engaged, and thanks again for coming.